I'd like for you to meet my friend, the Reverend Mindy McLanahan. And Mindy is a new resident of Muleshoe, and I hope that you will greet her as we have. And where do you come from, Mindy?
I've been serving the First United Methodist Church in Miami, Texas. It's pronounced Miami. The people there insist. Really? It looks like Miami, but I learned Miami.
I've learned something new today. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. The people in Miami will be glad to know that you know how to say their name of their town.
Now I do.
Yes.
And so you lived there how long?
7 years.
And always the minister at the Methodist Church there?
Correct. Before that, I was in Abilene for a year. And my hometown, where I grew up and taught school for a number of years, is Canadian, which is 23 miles northeast of Miami.
So you just stayed right in the vicinity the last, how many years?
7 years.
7 years. So that was about as long as the Reverend Monty Lavelle was here in Muleshoe. And so you're going to be the new minister at the First United Methodist Church of Muleshoe, taking Monty Lavelle's place, right?
That is correct. And Monty and I discussed how we had both stayed in those appointments for a number of years. And
yes. And he was just 15 or 20 miles from his parents.
It's interesting how many things were alike, yes.
And do your parents still live in Canadian?
My dad is deceased, but my mother lives in Canadian, yes. And my brother and his family live outside of Canadian.
Oh, right there in your back door.
Yes.
So they'll have to travel a few miles.
A few more miles, but the last 7 years have been wonderful for me to be able to be close to them and see my nieces and nephew and their activities.
And now tell us about your family. Your mother's name is what?
My mother's name is Lacreta, but she goes by Cheetah after Tarzan's monkey. Everybody in Canadian knows her as Cheetah. Hardly anyone knows her real name.
And is it McLanahan?
It's McLanahan, yes.
Cheetah McLanahan.
Correct, yes.
You won't forget that, I don't think.
That's an unusual name, yes.
And I do think we need to talk about the spelling of your name. It's not McLanahan, it's Lanahan.
That is correct.
We had a doctor here who was Clanahan.
Yes, that's what I heard. I think maybe he built this house or he lived in this house, maybe?
He did. I'd forgotten that. He certainly did.
So that's another interesting thing. And my name is spelled M-C, capital L-A-N-A-H-A-N. And I was told growing up that if I ever found anyone who had the name McLanahan and it was spelled that way, then we were related. Yes.
Well, did you ever so far find anybody?
I have not, but my brother used to be a professional rodeo cowboy, and in his travels, he ran across someone, I think out in California. Really? And the woman actually saw his name in the program and came to find him. Her maiden name had been McLanahan, and she had been told the same thing. So they had a little visit. We don't know exactly how we were related, but they both decided that maybe they were cousins.
Became kissing cousins.
Yes, yes.
Now, your father's name was what?
Billy Wayne McLanahan, but he was a small man, about 5'3", and everyone called him Pee-wee.
We have a Pee-wee in Muleshoe, Pee-wee Estrada. Years ago, he was the janitor at the Methodist Church. Now, tell me your father, what he did.
He was a cowboy, I guess is what you would say. He was his official title was, I think, General Manager of McMorty Cattle Company. But growing up, he mostly ran a small starter feedlot, and we family helped him from time to time with that sort of thing, and then they had cattle out on pastures. And
so are you a cowgirl? Well,
I don't know if I'm a cowgirl, but I can help take care of cattle a little bit, ride horses a little bit, and in high school I raised some show steers and pigs, so I've been around that sort of thing most of my life, yes.
And what about your mother? What does she do?
She has been a teacher's aide at the elementary school for, I don't know, many years. when we were small, she stayed at home and took care of the family. But when my brother started first grade, she went to work for the school, and she's been a teacher's aide there and knows all the kids and all of that. But this past year, she decided was going to be her last, and so she's retired now.
Oh my goodness! And she's here helping you move.
She's here helping me move. Yes, she's a great help. And
I'm sure.
Since
nice.
Yes, and since she's retired, maybe she'll come back occasionally. And
maybe so. We certainly invite her.
Well, I appreciate that, and maybe she'll be able to come.
And now tell us about professionally. Have you always been a Methodist minister?
No, I haven't. My first career was as an elementary school teacher. I taught second grade for 3 or 4 years, and then I taught third grade for a total of, I think, 17 years as a teacher. Really? Then I decided I couldn't resist the call to ministry. God just kept knocking on that door, and so I finally went to Asbury Theological Seminary in Wilmore, Kentucky, and then became a United Methodist pastor.
And so how many years total have you been in the pastorate?
I've just finished 8. My first year was in Abilene at Grace United Methodist Church in Abilene, and then 7 years at Miami.
I see. And so when you were asked if you would like to come to Muleshoe, well, what did you think about Muleshoe?
I thought, I don't think I've ever been to Muleshoe. It's an interesting name. Anytime you hear that name, you think, well, I wonder where it got that name and what's it like there. When they called and asked me if I would be interested to come to Muleshoe, the district superintendent said wonderful things about the...
Was that Richard Edwards?
Richard Edwards, yes. And I believe he's been here for a while.
He was the minister here in the late 80s and early 90s. So he knew that he had to send a good minister to this church. He knew how we deserve a good minister, but all ministers are good.
Well, thank you. I think maybe Richard, I take that as a compliment, and hopefully Richard thought I would be a good fit, and he would know the church and the community well.
And he knows what fits here.
I think so. So I'm trusting him, but mostly I'm trusting God, because the very morning that they called to ask me if I would be interested in coming to Muleshoe, I had prayed. And I have felt led to pray a prayer of surrender, that wherever God would have me to come or go or do whatever.
Or stay.
Right, exactly. Because I really wasn't looking to move. But I knew that the cabinet was meeting and that there was a chance that they might call me. And so I just really prayed that morning, that particular morning, that whatever God would have me to do, I would be willing to do that. And then just a couple of hours later, they called and said, we think you would do well in Muleshoe. So,
what a compliment.
Well, I think I take that as a compliment, and I felt like God had prepared me to know that was His.
Well, now, how did you get the original call to become a minister? Because that is a hard thing. Do you realize in Muleshoe, a town of a little over 5,000, there's never been a woman minister in Muleshoe in any congregation?
Well, I did not know that, but that's...
Now you do.
Now I know. I'm the first. I'm going to have to blaze a trail. Yes. Well, originally, I felt a call to ministry when I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, and I had no idea how that could possibly be, because I had never thought or known of a woman being a pastor. At that time, I went to the First Christian Church in Canadian and had no idea, no concept of a woman being in ministry, but I really believed that God had set that on my heart and in my mind. And it wasn't an audible voice, but it was a definite knowing that this was what God intended for me to do, and I just really had no idea how that could be possible. And then I always remembered it, but I did not pursue it or think a whole lot about it until much later. After I was a teacher, I went on the walk to Emmaus. Some people may be familiar with that. And during after I went on the walk to Emmaus, began to serve on some teams, I began to remember that call and to know that it was possible. And through Emmaus, I got to know some women pastors, and I began to realize that it was possible, and then that God really He intended that me to follow through. Yeah, and He intended for me to follow through on that.
Something you may not know either, that here in this community of Muleshoe and Progress is just out US 84 west toward Clovis. Well, there was a family, a very large family, who belonged to the Progress Methodist Church, and the mother of that family had reared her family of maybe 6 or 7, and she received the call to become a minister, and that's the first Methodist minister who's a woman that I knew of, and she was sent to a church, and I think it was called Monument Lake Methodist Church, and it was just south of town in the Three-Way community. It's not there anymore. It was a rural church, and she pastored in churches in the Northwest Texas Conference for years, and she might have been the first woman. Ruth Cooper was her name.
Well, I'll have to look that up in the history book.
Yes.
We have a Northwest Texas Conference history, so I'll have to.
And if she wasn't the first, she was definitely one of the first. So, but she never pastored the Muleshoe Church or in Muleshoe.
Well, that's wonderful. So there has been some idea that women could be in ministry since
you lived here back in the 60s, I believe, is when that really happened, when she first became a minister. Now, tell me about your brother. What is his name?
His name is Mindy McLanahan.
And what does he do now?
He now works for the State Wildlife Department. Parks and Wildlife Department. There's a wildlife reserve outside of Canadian.
And there's one here.
That's what we heard, yes. And so he loves that. He's blessed to have a job that he loves, and he has a wife and 3 children, so he's very happy there.
And you enjoy being an aunt then?
I love being an aunt. Since I don't have any children of my own, I have to spoil my nieces and nephews.
And tell me their names and ages.
His oldest is named Madison, but we call her Maddie, and she just turned 16.
Oh my.
And his son is Matt, and he is going to turn 8 on Sunday, the 24th. And the little one is going to turn 5 on July 1st, and her name is Miley. Then my sister lives in Ohio with her husband and 2 sons, and they are Caleb, who is about to turn 15 in July, and Reese, who just turned 12 in May.
Well, that is wonderful. You have a big family.
I do. I have plenty of children to spoil.
Yeah. And you'll have more in Muleshoe.
And I look forward to that.
And speaking of children, is there anything that's coming up in the way of Vacation Bible School or anything that you know of?
Yes, but I don't know the date. It's the end of July, isn't it? I think it's
July the 28th.
I was going to say it's July 20-something. VBS in the park. And I spoke briefly yesterday with, I believe, Iva Noble, and she's getting ready for that, and she and I are going to meet next week if we can find a time we can both be available, and she's going to give me the details, so then I'll know more about that.
Okay. And all the children will want to come to the old city park on that one day, Saturday, July the 28th. And this is the place that they've had it the last couple of years. And they'll even have lunch for you before it concludes that afternoon. Now, this Sunday and the Sundays this summer, do you have anything that you feel like that you'll be sharing specifically in your sermons?
Well, the first 2 Sundays I'm planning to introduce myself. So my story about growing up and accepting Christ as my Savior, that's going to be more the focus of the first Sunday, this coming Sunday, and then the next Sunday more about the call to ministry and how I have arrived at this point. And then beyond that, I'm not for sure, but well, I'll just leave it that way. I'm going to kind of meet some people and get a sense of what God, where we want to go from there.
And of course, you can always hear live the entire broadcast here on Reach Broadband Channel 6 at 11 o'clock every Sunday morning with the Reverend Mindy McLanahan. And you can hear her sermon on our website, GileadMadvertisingMuleshoe.com, or simply MuleshoeTV.com, and click at the top of the front page on the left-hand side, First Methodist. Or you can listen to Dr. Stacy Connor by clicking on the First Baptist link. Now, anything you want to add about your life or any hopes or dreams for the First United Methodist Church of Muleshoe?
Well, I'm looking forward to joining with the people here in Muleshoe in ministry for God's kingdom. And the people that I've met from the church have been wonderful. They met me here with a big crew to unload all my things and have been invited to eat and food brought in and people checking on me. They're just a wonderful church family, and I'm looking forward to being a part of that.
And what about hobbies? Do you have any hobbies, Mindy, or interests other than, of course, your church?
I play the guitar a little bit, so a little bit of interest, I guess, in music. Not really too many hobbies. Monty has a beautiful backyard, and I'm not much of a gardener, so I'm going to have to work really hard to keep all those lovely plants alive.
Did he have a garden started for you?
He doesn't have a garden, just the flowering plants. Yes. So we're trying to figure out what to do with his garden plot because that's.
And just in case you didn't know, you've been writing the Mule Train News. Have you ever ridden a mule train before now?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, you rode really nice. And we've been talking to the Reverend Mindy McLanahan, and Mindy is the new minister at the First United Methodist Church here in Muleshoe at 507 West 2nd. And you are asked to welcome her to the Mule Memorial City.